makes me wanna stay.
This is Una, everyone.
Thank you.
Say hello, Una.
So we started thinking that really we need to do something, you know, because things are not right. The UK has always tried to hide behind what's going on in the States, and enough is enough, because we know it's happening right under our noses, and it's happening all the time. And this is in every area, whether it's the police, whether it's the NHS, whether it's councils in local areas, education, your health suffers, everything. It's everywhere you turn, there's problems. So this is why Pursuit of Happiness online community was born. So this evening we are presenting, we've been following the Small Act series. So last week was the finale of education, and this is a really good topic, I thought. I mean, I thought the actual education segment, the final one, was really touching. It actually brought me to tears. And I spoke with Pauline from Bedford, and she offered to come and do the presenting of education for this evening's event. So yeah, she's the founding member of LOWD, which is the Legacy of Windrush Descendants, which is based in Bedford, which I'm sure obviously many of you know Pauline and where she's from. And there's a picture of her with her people. And then now we're going to watch a short video, and David Olusogun is presenting this, and I think there's key points within this video that really touches home about what is happening, what's happened, and what needs to happen. So we'll just play that now, and then we can move on to the next part of the event.
The place of black people in British history is sometimes thought of as a story that begins with the arrival of the Windrush. In reality, the Windrush is just one chapter in a much longer history. Black people have been living in this country for centuries, and the story of the black presence in the United Kingdom goes back all the way to Roman times. This is old history, the history that you don't learn at school. When I was 16, I went into a bookshop and I bought this book, Staying Power by Peter Fryer. And to black British people of my generation, this was the most important book in the world, because what it did was it showed us that we weren't new arrivals, but that we were part of a longer, deeper history that went back centuries. Because we're not telling key moments in British history, whole aspects of the story of Britain are simply being left out of the picture. And I think it's time that changed. That phrase, black British, that we're really used to today, I never heard that when I was growing up. To be black and to be British, well, they were two separate things. You couldn't really be both. To be black was not really to be British. And it was the history, it was books like Staying Power by Peter Fryer that showed me that there'd always been black British people.
Black British history is so diverse. It's just kind of a shame that at a young age you can't really participate and celebrate in your identity.
How can you not want to learn about your past, because you can't go forward without understanding your past?
When I talk to young black people, what they tell me is that they are as desperate as I was when I was their age to learn more about the longer history of the black presence in Britain, and that history is still not being taught to them at school.
When it came to learning about black history, it was mainly pumped within a month of something that should have been a year consistently. And it was kind of ranging from Mary Seacole to Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King.
What a lot of people are taught at school are the biographies of individual black people. And there's lots of good stuff that comes out of that. It's really great that kids now learn about Mary Seacole and they learn about Walter Tull. That's great, and I haven't got a problem with it. But if you only do that, what you find is you just create these isolated black characters, and what you don't learn about are the forces that led Britain to interact with Africa, interact with Africans. You don't learn about just how important the sugar slavery economy was in the 17th and 18th and early 19th centuries. We don't learn that Britain's relationship with the United States, economic relationship after the American War of Independence and right up to the Civil War, is founded on cotton, and that cotton is produced by African Americans, enslaved African Americans.
We're kind of told in a way that these things didn't happen in the UK, and we're told that certain things like this happened within America, and you know, it wasn't on our soil, and we treated black people great and well, and we provided all these things for them, when in the reality there was no difference.
It's great that we learn today about the biographies of individual black figures from the past, and those stories were important to me when I was growing up. But what we seem still to neglect are exploring other issues, things like the development of racial thinking in the 18th and 19th centuries, or the centrality of slavery in the British economy. Black history is more than just biographies. It is fundamental to understanding British history because it is a fundamental part of British history.
I don't know if this whole exclusionary history is like a nod to empire, laziness, or they just don't really care about black people, people of colour, working class, or women in general. I just don't know.
What the new science is proving is that there were Afro-Romans living in Britain. There are people who find it challenging, even threatening, that black people have been in Britain since Roman times. There are people who feel the need, when this is discussed online, to go on Twitter, to go on social media and discredit these ideas. There are people who would rather deny the facts than confront the quite simple, uncontroversial, in my view, reality, is that Britain was part of the Roman Empire and the Roman Empire was multiracial. One of the best examples is the Ivory Bangle lady. She was a middle-class Afro-Roman living in 4th century York. We know she was African because of the tests that had been done on her remains and because among her possessions was a bracelet made of African ivory. John Blank was a trumpeter in the court of the Tudors, in the court of Henry VIII, and he is the first Black Briton for whom we have not just a name and evidence from the archives, we have his picture. He appears on a document called the 1511 Westminster Tournament Roll. He is the first Black Briton whose name we can give a face to. That makes him really special. Among the documents that tell us something of the life of John Blank is a petition that he had written demanding a pay rise. Now he's sending this petition to his boss, to Henry VIII. What that tells us is that this is somebody who values themselves. This is somebody who understands that their skills are worth something, and he's willing to stick his neck out and demand a pay rise from Henry VIII, and he gets his pay rise. When I was at school, I was taught about the Act of Abolition, that Britain freed the slaves. What I wasn't told was that Britain also compensated the slave owners to the tune £20 million. Now that's around £17 billion today. Slavery wasn't just abolished, the slave owners were compensated for their loss of property, human property. There was another part of the Act of Abolition that I didn't learn at school. What I wasn't taught was that the former slaves weren't freed immediately. They were made to work 45 hours a week for the next 4 to 6 years for their former owner in a system that was called apprenticeship. There is a specific moment in British history that I'm thinking about this year. We've marked lots of centenary anniversaries from 1914 to 1918, but there is another set of stories about another year. A year in which black soldiers returned from fighting but were not included in the victory parades. A year of race riots. A year in which a black man was lynched on the streets of a British city. All of that happened in the forgotten year of 1919.
Wow. So yeah, some powerful messages coming there on untold stories of British history that includes black people. Yeah, so what we'll do is introduce P to the arena now. I think P will introduce herself as well, but yeah, you're on mute at the minute, P, so please unmute yourself, or I can suggest that you do. Yeah.
Yeah, done that. Sorry about that.
That's
Right.
okay.
Hi, everyone. My name's Pauline Stepney, but most people know me, call me P. And my background is youth work. But I worked in several places, always addressing equality, always trying to address equity. I've worked in the museum, and that was to look at kind of diversity, as they like to call it, to look at trying to bring more different kind of people into the museum. I've worked in an equalities agency where I had to take on different cases of people being discriminated at work, in school, and school mainly was the most people used to come to me with issues in school, you know, down to teachers calling them racist, to them to a young lady having to apologise when somebody called her the N-word, would you believe? We did get an apology from the teacher. It took nearly 4 months, but we did get it. But, you know, it's what I've always found sad is that the issues I found in school, I still find to this day. So even though we have more young people that are breaking down the barriers to achieve something, because even when people use the word first, it annoys me. Unless they're going to say the first to break down a barrier, not the first because we suddenly found some brains and stuck them in our head and then became knowledgeable. It's because we broke down barriers to that learning. So I'm going to give you a little game here first, right, just to kind of break down some barriers. Then we're going to go into the presentation, and then hopefully we can have a lovely conversation afterwards. Okay, so I'm just going to share this screen and hope that my skills, my IT skills, are good. Okay, here we go. So this is called Say What, Who Now. So what I want to do, and I can remember what Ayana told me, oh my goodness me. Somebody, she said insert, didn't she? And then Jakes,
yeah.
And then I'm going to draw, that's it. Right, so we've got Philippa, Pat Evans, Val McCullough, Lewis Latimer, Walter Toll, Robert Wedderburn, Mary Seacole, Nzinga. I think that's all the names. There could be another one below. And on the other side, we've got Rupert Murdoch, David Beckham, Emily Pankhurst. Anybody notice anything about the sets of people? You can take your mutes off, by the way.
I will make that happen as well.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What have you noticed?
Some of them are black, some of them are white.
Yes. So,
over the last kind of few days, it's really been interesting.
Yeah. So, what I'm going to do with your help is marry up the black side, which is this side. Can you see me swirling around here? And the white side, which is this side. So I want you to find the equivalent from the black side to the white side. So start anywhere. Philippa. Who do you think she is? Look down the white side because it might give you a clue. Take your mute off, Michaela.
Elizabeth?
Oh,
Elizabeth?
Is it? Sorry.
Okay.
Do you mean? Oh, I don't know. Do you mean Philippa, the poet?
Oh, I'm not going to tell you. And her name was Phyllis, not Philippa.
Phyllis.
Go,
Oh yes, Phyllis.
Can I guess one? I don't know Philippa, but I know that Walter Tull and David Beckham, both amazing footballers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if Walter Tull was in these days,
Nightingale
was actually, yeah. If Walter Tull would have been richer than David Beckham.
He was amazing. He was fought in the World War I, and he was also an amazing football player.
Yes.
Oh yes.
I heard somebody say Florence Nightingale.
Yeah, that was me, Pauline, and Mary Seacole.
Yeah. Yes. Well done. And what do we know about the wonderful crikey, I can't do this line again.
Sorry, can I just step in quickly? Somebody has a television on in the background or something going on.
Oh,
we can't hear.
I can mute everyone, but
right.
That's better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We need the interaction, which is good anyway because I got that bit wrong. So Mary Seacole and Florence Nightingale, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and you all know that obviously Florence Nightingale was not exactly a fan of Mary Seacole.
Yeah.
Yes, and Mary
Got one.
Seacole is now in the curriculum, although they kind of leave that bit out for some strange reason. Go on, Michelle.
Yeah, they do teach it to year 2 children, so it's not really appropriate to start a fight with 4-year or 5-year-olds. It's not good. It's Lewis Latimer and Thomas Edison.
Yeah.
They
And what have they got? What have
did
they got in common?
Light bulb. Well, Thomas Edison started it, but Lewis Latimer was the one who finished it. The filament.
Yeah. Because without Lewis Latimer's input,
Brain,
it would have been a lovely little empty sculpture.
Absolutely.
Because his filter was made of paper, which burnt out immediately, and Lewis Latimer made one of carbon.
Yes.
Yes.
He did.
Yes. Although Thomas Edison took all of the glory
the praise
until now.
Yeah.
All the praise. Anyone else?
Nzinga.
Yeah, and who?
And I'd love to say Florence Nightingale, but it's not. It's Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth.
No.
Isn't it?
No.
It's both of the queens.
Yeah, they were.
I would have thought it was then as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Boadicea.
Who?
Is it not Boadicea?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. The difference is, yes, Boadicea and Nzinga were queens, but they were also warriors. They actually fought. So Nzinga, when she saw the people of Congo were being taken by slave traders, she started to fight them off because Alfonso II didn't quite get what was going on until it was too late, wrote a letter, but by that time they'd started to go to other places in Africa to take people, but she fought them off, and at one stage she was fighting them off, and she was pregnant on her horse with her weapons, and she was just going for it and stopping the people.
Filled it.
Yeah. So next.
So then that must be Philippa and Elizabeth.
Yes. Yes. And Queen Philippa, she married, and this is me now, it's either Edward III or George III. But anyway, it was somebody with the third. George, yes. Yep. And she married him. So when they keep on saying about Meghan Markle, first black, or first mixed heritage.
I know.
She's
not. And there was
not.
also Charlotte Sophia as well.
There's even one before Philippa as well, but anyway, won't go back there.
But they painted her very, very white. But if you actually look close up at her features, that ain't white people's features.
But that's what they did. They tried to hide that fact, didn't they?
Yeah, Mary Seacole's picture was actually painted over with another painting, and they found it and took it off, and we got the original picture of her. So who have we got left now?
So Pat Evans, maybe Twiggy. I don't know. It's a guess.
Yes, that is a guess. But it's a very good guess. And she was a model, and what she was always made to do was to lighten her face. So we're really light coloured foundation and have wigs that sort of portrayed her having European hair. And she got so fed up with it one day, she just shaved it off and turned up, and they were like, "You've shaved off your hair." And she said, "I know, because I'm fed up with you dictating to me how to wear my hair." Sadly, she didn't really get that many modelling pictures after that, but she started a career in design and everything else. So, but she stuck it to the man and just said, "No, this is who I am, leave me alone." But amazing lady, look her up. So we've got Balma Colour, and we've got, that's it.
Rupert Murdoch, was it not?
Yeah. Oh no, we've got another one, Robert Wedderburn. Yeah, you're right. And what did Balma Colour do?
She wasn't she not an editor?
He.
Sorry, he.
Yeah.
An editor.
Yeah, he started the Voice newspaper, and Rupert Murdoch started his. So obviously, Robert Wedderburn and Emily Pankhurst are together. So what did Emily Pankhurst do?
Emmeline Pankhurst, you mean? Yeah.
Emmeline.
Suffragette.
Yeah. She was a suffragette.
Front of a bus.
Yeah. Robert Wedderburn was actually born as a free person. His father was a slave owner, but he had to still watch relatives on where he lived being whipped. And he thought, well, this cannot be right. went off to England to fight for the abolition of slavery. But when he got there, he also found that the white people were also treated, the poor white people were treated just as wretchedly as black people. I mean, there was a 7-year-old girl, I think what really got to me was a little 7-year-old girl. She stole a loaf of bread and she was hung for stealing a loaf of bread. And that kind of like made him start doing the loads of sermons and everything, and just talking about the rights of people and looking up laws and everything else. And the authorities didn't really like that. So they sent someone in to kind of spy for him, and he was later done for treason and put to prison for the rest of his life. No one actually knows the actual date he died. It's just his name just disappeared off the records. But his family have now said, oh, this is our wonderful ancestor at last. And it wasn't he great, blah, blah, blah. So they've actually now said, yes, we do have a black brother in our family. So that's some of the kind of things I have been going around in schools and doing. Sometimes I put the profession down the middle and then they kind of can guess what they did. You can do that with anything. And you can do this with your children, you know, and it's a really, really great way of them trying to find out who these different people are. So I'll stop sharing now. Thanks for taking part in that. And now we can have the presentation up, Mark.
Yeah, I think Una, once again, you're up. Excellent.
As I said before, my background is in youth work. And this next slide just shows, this is, I did a project many, many years ago called Student Voice with Bedford Borough Council. And at the time, we've got these figures off the census. But what we were finding while working with the MASS, which was an agency set by the council to look at how they can improve the abilities of our children. So what we found when we started doing this project is that the young people were engaging with us when they told us that they weren't. So I think we worked at 4 schools, and the young people were, because what I did was start teaching them about Black history and just taught them about Black history. So if they were doing math, I taught them about a Black mathematician. If they were doing geography, I taught them about a Black explorer, etc. And I found that they were engaging 10 times more. They wanted to stay, to the point that we had 2 boys that one time I thought, I'm sure I've seen them in the class before. They skived off their lesson to come into this lesson. And I asked them why. It's because they said, well, you're teaching us about us, and I love it. There was one boy that he couldn't even be bothered to read. He decided, I am going to learn in my next lesson because I want to do a presentation. So we saw that young people engaging, learn about themselves as a good way in. When I was younger, my mum was always telling me about the Black history she knew, which is mainly about Jamaica. So I learned about Marcus Garvey, I learned about Mary C. Cole, Sharp, all of those people. And it gave me a thirst to find out more. And when I went into the archives, I was really looking for some photos of my dad, because my dad had started the cricket team in Bedford. And I found a lady called Sabina, another lady called Margaret Juniper. And when I looked at the date, I almost fell off the chair, 1710 and 1735. Until then, I thought Black people had only come to Britain when my mum did. You know, that was it. That's the only time. So to see, and the reason why I knew they were Black, because there weren't many photos. Do you want to know why I knew they were Black? Because of how they described them and their names. Sabina's last name was A. Black Moore. And Margaret Juniper was written down as with brown skin and a broad nose and dark woolly hair. Yeah. And even the death records are even more shocking, because they just go to every single description, you know, but you know that they're Black. So it gave me a thirst to look for more information about the people that lived in Bedford, in Britain, and so on. So saying like what the film you just watched with David Oxulugu and what he said, that's where my thirst came from. So not only was I learning about my mum's country, I was learning about other countries, which led me to go to Africa and so on, because I just want to know more and more and more. Next slide, please. Next slide.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, P.
So I'm going to do a little dance while you all wait. There you go. So LOWD, who are we? What do we do? We're still in the base of forming. We are doing some active things, like we've been feeding people during the lockdown. We were working with Miracle Church of God in Christ, Samson's Academy. We attend meetings with our local council at the round table to look at how we can address, again, the issues of inequality and equity. And the sad thing about it, I remember when my mum and other people were fighting for the same thing. And this is years gone, and we're still fighting for that same thing. We're still fighting for justice to be treated fairly by the police, by the criminal justice system, looking at fair housing, fairness in getting jobs, etc. And it's really sad that it's like a record that's just stuck. And it's about time we try to unstick that needle. So I'm never going to give up till the day I die. So this is just another attempt at trying to address all these issues. But we have put in our application to become a charity, and we received £10,000 to help with a project that we're trying to help with counselling, helping people with tech, feeding people. And obviously at this time now, it's even more prevalent that we're working together to do this. And Dorian's in there somewhere. We work really, really well together. Even when he's horrible to me, we still work really well. Don't we, Dorian? So,
I work for him. You sit there. Thank you. Bye.
Told you, mean. But anyway, so that's LOWD. That's who we are. The legacy of the Windrush Descendants. Happily now partnering and working with Pursuit of Happiness, Black Voice in Letchworth. You know, soon we're going to take over the world. But yes, we are going to try and do something that's amazing this time and get that record unstuck. Next slide, please. If it takes long, I'll just do another dance. Don't worry.
You're fine.
So what does the law say about equality? It says wonderful things. Let's eliminate unlawful racial equality, yet still it's still here. Let's promote equality of opportunities and good relations, yet still it's still here. Sometimes we have to try and use these laws against what's actually happening, but it's getting to know that, to strategically sit on places where we can actually make a difference. But we have to have that support when we do that. You know, we've got a new group that started. It's not a constitution group, but it's there for help, called the Bedford African and Caribbean Network. And through that, there's people sharing information, looking at how they can get people in strategic places on board, but get that support. Because we can also, yes, go and be a governor in school, and you go and be a governor in school and everybody's horrible to you. You've got nowhere to go and get support, got nowhere to go and find out what your rights are, etc. And this is, I think, the next step. So we're not just looking at we've got all our famous speakers and our famous campaigners and our famous activists such as Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey and his wives. But each time we did that, it was just one at a time. We need to get a team going, and we need that team to carry on going. And we need to, as we have our children, we bring them up. So they're the next campaigners. So in the end, again, I'm living in an ideal world. We can try and go some way to eliminate, or at least live with the fact that we can get what we need for our community. Next slide, please. Right, there goes the dance.
Yeah, delayed reaction.
I'm doing it. Big box, little box. I can't even do that actually, but you know.
I pressed it as soon as you said it. I pressed it. It's a delay. It's a delay.
So I've said back in the day, in the 1960s, and I'm showing my age here now, we were told we had unrealistic aspirations. You can't be a doctor because you're black. Why don't you go and work in that lovely factory down the road that makes socks? You know? So I remember when I actually said, I actually said to one teacher that I wanted to be the queen. Because this is when we were first done, because you can't, because you don't get black queens. You know, if you knew then what you know now, I'd have had a big answer for her. but I didn't. So I just went, oh, okay. You know, the literature was racist. I actually can't find my little book. I think it keeps in hiding for me. But we had little books like Little Black Sambo and Little Black Mandingo that we had to read with this grotesque looking drawing of someone just to and it was said, oh, this is what you look like. No, I did not. You know, I was given a book one time that had a black man, black woman, black child, white child. And under the white people, it had man, woman, child. Under the black people, it had Negro, Negress, and Pickaninny. I cannot tell you that when I brought that book home, the colourful words my mum said that day. And she closed the book and she goes, you're not reading that. And the next day, I thought mum was going off to work like she normally does. So my sister would take me to school, my older one, and it was Normie coming to school with you. And she had the book in her hand. She slammed it down and she goes, my child is a child. And she's not reading this. I used to think that my mum did things on purpose to embarrass me, but I really, really am grateful to her standing up for who we are and standing up for who she, you know, wanted me to believe that I'm just as good as anyone else. There was a meeting one time where we were called at the time migrant children. And my mum said, my child is British because she was born here. And they said, no, she's a migrant child. And my mum said, the only place my child emigrated from was my womb. And that was it. And they hated, if they saw my mum coming up the path, it'd be like, oh my God, what have we done now? Because my mum would be coming there. She never shouted or anything, but she would state her point. And I grew up to do the same with my children. Next slide, please. George Padmore, he, along with Bill Moody and some others, used to basically fight for the rights of Black people. He was born in 1901 and died in 1959, sorry. But his legacy still lived on in his institute. And I urge you to look this up and read this about what they call the subnormal child. They used to have these educational psychologists that come along and they'd ask us about our lives. And I do remember one coming to see us. There was a group of us. And they would actually then say whether the child, if you couldn't read a certain word, they didn't look into dyslexia or anything else. You were just put on the bus with what, and I'm sorry to say, we call the stupid kids, you know? And you never really saw them again. And that child that you went to school with, that used to play with, then developed some bad behavioural, it was awful. They changed, they completely changed. They didn't learn anything. And some of them would like it so school's easy until they realise that as they're getting older, I'm not going to get a job because I actually can't read anything. And these units that were called schools, they were damaging to Black children. And a lot of the times they were in areas where, because parents couldn't, they were bused sometimes from our school, or sometimes they had to make their own way. And they were in areas that were very, very highly white population. And so they could be at risk from being beaten up and everything else. It was damaging to the children. And most of the time, my friends who were born in the Caribbean, all either were in the remedial classes or sent to this unit, but parents had to fight to get their children out of there because they could read and write. It had a terrible effect on how we then saw ourselves as either the exceptional or the lucky ones, that we were there with the white people. You know, that's the impact it had. And so I'm not talking this from an expert's point of view. This is all what I've experienced and all what I've seen over the years. So that's the whole subnormal thing. I do remember one of my friends being called subnormal. She was bright. She could recite anything, and she was sent on this bus. And it took ages before my mum and her mum and all of the mothers are actually passed now, and Mr. O'Sullivan, to actually go to the school and say no. I think Sonia can verify this. Sonia's mum came here as a teacher, and they never gave her a job as a teacher. Am I right, Sonia?
You're correct, Pauline.
Yeah.
You are correct. My mother and my late father was an engineer, and they put him to work in the brick factory. And what you're talking about, the education is subnormal children. I know what you're talking about, and I remember it happening. I'm a child of the 60s. I saw the same thing. So when I saw the Small Acts program education last week, it brought me to tears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I do remember Eunice and others being shipped off in the bus and them crying because some of those, you know, the little girl that was barking?
Yeah.
There was a little girl there and she just used to go like this the whole time. And I was thinking, why is she in there with her? And it took a long fight before we could get that corrected. The Saturday school started, and I know it did make a difference. It did and it didn't, because teachers were still kind of insistent that what we were being taught, it was ridiculous. Don't be silly. There weren't black people in the war. Don't be silly. A black man didn't invent the traffic lights. So, so how come you don't know? You know who invented the television, you don't know who invented the traffic lights. I was thrown out of class so much. Okay. I used to be, Sonia can tell you, quite a meek type, quiet little child. But my mum's rebellious side rubbed off for me. You'd never believe that, would you? Nope. It rubbed off for me to the point that I was just thrown out. So one day I actually stood outside the class and I had this tiny, weeny little black glove. And this is in the 70s. And I stood outside the classroom like that. And I was out there for ages. My arm was getting tired because I wanted the teacher to see me. Eventually she did. She opened the door, took me down to the headmaster's office. I still had my arm like this. And she goes, put your arm down and take that ridiculous glove off. But I made my point. Got detention, but I made my point. Next slide, please. And in the end, actually, I was thrown out of history altogether. And I wasn't allowed to take it as my choice because I'd correct the teacher all the time. Next slide. That's it. Thank you. And I'm skipping forward quite a few years. Operation Black Vote came on and they brought out the Black Manifesto, which I have here. And again, this is in 2005, but nothing much has changed. They wanted to look at high achieving schools and colleges to have legal binding quotas for their intakes on low income Black and minority children. Some universities did make changes, like Cambridge did a little program for a while. End to exclusion. Unfortunately, that's still happening. I have still seen Black children who are being excluded for something a white child has done the same. White child gets a chance, Black child doesn't. And what I have found, the figures are 6 times, mixed heritage children especially, 6 times more likely to be excluded. So when you go into the pupil referral units or any of those schemes that look at trying to support children that have been excluded from school, by rights, you should see for every 1 white child, there should be 6 Black children or 6 mixed race children, correct? Is my maths right? Yeah, I do not see that. There always either be completely white or 1 Black child who the teachers still don't really want to work with, saying that they're troublesome. I did a project some time ago called Young Black Unity. I didn't label it, the children did. And that's how they felt. They felt that. And so they wanted to do an event where they could invite teachers, the mayor, the police, their parents, and other people in town to see what they do and what they're about. They were so proud. And when I say, I still kind of get quite teary because when I was given these 18 young people, they said, oh, well, they're lost. We don't know what to do with them. They're lost completely. And so when I went in there, it was almost like being in that film. They weren't as bad, though, with Michelle Pfeiffer, you know. And it was just, they were just staring at me. And I was just like, so, hey. And then one of them said his last name was Cudjoe. And they asked me what I was there for, and I said, I'm going to talk to you about some Black history, so you know who you are. And they said, we've heard about slavery, we've heard about this. I said, actually, no, I'm not even going to talk about slavery right now. And so I put up some pictures of some kings and queens and stuff like that. And they were saying, where? Really? And they wanted to know more. And I brought these on little cards, and they were just handing them out. And they go, look at this one. Look what this one did. Look what that one did. And they said, can we look these up, miss? And I said, well, yeah, of course you can. They started looking bits up, and they go, I found another one, miss. I found this. Considering they said, the teacher said some of them will walk out, none of them walked out that day. None of them ever walked out after that. They just carried on. They wanted to learn more and more. And this is the same as almost like the project I did called Student Voice, where children were skiving off their lessons to come stay in there. But you think the teachers would say, okay, all right, we understand why you're doing it. Or even, what are you showing them so we can get them engaged? No, they were punished still for skiving. I'm standing there as an adult, a Black adult, and still be taught to as if I'm one of the children for encouraging them to stay. Could you believe that? And I had to challenge it. And then how do you think they dealt with that when I challenged it? What do you think happened?
They stopped it, put a stop to it?
They stopped the scheme. Young children were being too empowered. When the bell went, they said, we don't want to go to break. They wanted to learn more. You'd think he'd be encouraged. There was one boy that actually got up, and no, maybe shouldn't have flung the chair around, but he goes, you're coming, you're disturbing us. We want to learn this. Leave us alone. And she said, he's always been a problem. So I asked her about him because I wanted to know. This will shock you because I still, to this day, I'm shocked. Her words were, every time I say something and I put a question to the class, he wants to answer it. Yes, you did hear me right. Every time I put a question, he wants to answer it. And I said, so let me get this straight. You're upset because somebody is showing you that you're doing your job well, is learning because you're a teacher and he's learning, and you have an issue with that. The boy he got 9 A stars when he left, but I had to call the mum and say, watch out for your son, please. Because you're labeling a child because they're showing intelligence. I was in one class when I used to go and read to children, do Anansi stories in another school in Bedford. And a little boy, again, putting his hand up all the time. He wanted to answer the question. He was put in the corner. There was a white boy doing the same thing. Okay then, Jonathan. But the other boy was put in the corner for wanting to do the same thing. When I fostered a child, I've only got girls, so fostering a boy was very, very different for me. And I found I was forever going in because they were just labeling him. He achieved, without revising, 85% in maths and science. And he wasn't encouraged. So I'd go in and I'd encourage. Yes, he did have a behavioural problem, but his mum was ill. She was dying. And I'd go in the classroom and sit with them. They didn't actually like when I wanted to go and sit with them, but they couldn't stop me because I knew other parents did, and encouraged him to learn. But they still saw him as an issue, as a problem. And even after his mother died, it was about 2 months afterwards, and he just flipped out for some reason. They were ready to exclude him. And I had to go and said, he's just lost his mum. And the teacher's words were, it was 2 months ago, he should have got over it. We had 2 boys whose parents were abusive. One white, one black. They both needed counselling because they'd seen what their fathers had done. The white boy got help the next day. The black boy, nearly 9 months, I had to keep on going in because they couldn't find somebody appropriate, even though I gave them loads and loads of information on where they could find some. So I know I'm painting a bleak picture at the moment because obviously our children are achieving, they are beating down the barriers, but there are so many more that need help. Next slide, please. Now, the Moseley School in Birmingham started off as a supplementary school. I was telling you about supplementary schools before. And they went one step further. Now, I'm very, very encouraged by this. And that's why I said about examples. they incorporated what they were doing into the school, into the actual school, into the day-to-day lessons. Those children excelled. They did meditation, drumming, you name it, learnt about themselves. Because when a young person sees something about themselves, they will engage because they want to know more. The young man, I said that when he saw his name was Cudjo, he decided, I am going to engage in class because I want to do a presentation. And he did a whole presentation about Nanny Cudjo because she had his last name. And before, they said they would never engage before. And one of the teachers did upset me when they came into the class, because I said to her, oh, could you come in so that we can, I think we want to do something on history. And she goes, if I knew you were working with this lot, I wouldn't have bothered. And she walked out. And what I also heard the children say to me, which was a shock, Miss said this was good. So I said, has no one ever told you? And they went, no, no one ever tells us that in here. And just with that alone, that praise, you know, one thing I also did was get them to look at problem solving. Just little things like, you know, it just really helped, because I have noticed that children, our Black children, do learn differently. You know, more on an artistic intelligence than anything else. But learning artistically, it opens your mind to so many other things. Student voice in Bedford, like I told you, obviously the project was stopped because I confronted a teacher, but it led to that time when we were there, none of the Black children were excluded. All the mixed heritage children were excluded. And we also broke down the barriers between the Caribbean young people, the mixed heritage young people, and the African young people, in how they saw themselves, and they worked together. Because there were some barriers there, there was some name calling. So we addressed it, we talked about it, gave them a chance to talk about it, and they realized the value of their heritage. Again, we can do this again. Next slide, please. So our story, my favorite lady. The more you know about your history, the more liberated you are. Anybody disagree? Do you?
No.
Good. So the next slide, I'm just going to do just a little presentation on some of the things I do in school. And I say history, but I call it her story, okay? Because I'm a lady. Right, so these ladies, Hatshepsut, Mary Fields and Beth Powell. Hatshepsut became a pharaoh, which was not the thing for a girl to do, a woman to do, or anything like that. She showed her power. She wanted to go one step further, and she grew a moustache and a beard. It didn't look good, but she didn't care. She kept it good, well coiffed. In the statue here, it hasn't got her beard and moustache, but she ruled for 21 years. And she's kind of ruthless in some ways, but she proved her point. Mary Fields, you see her there with her gun. You think I'm going to argue with she? Mad. She was basically used to go on the highway delivering the mail, goods, parcels, everything. And she didn't have a wagon like other people. She just had a horse and cart. And she never, ever got robbed. She just had their gun. Sometimes she even did it alone. No one stopped her or anything else. And she did that for many, many years. She, with her money, she made quite a lot of money. She started up a school. She started up help. Each time, a lot of the people I'm going to show you, they put something back into the community because they could see the inequality, you know? They could hear the phone. Sonia.
Sorry, that's mine. Sorry. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
Answer it.
Let's all look at Sonia now. Let's all look at Sonia.
Owen, get my phone. Owen, come and take my phone. Come and take it.
All right. Okay, then we've got Beth Powell, and she was one of 28 female pilots that flew Boeing 747, so it's transatlantic flights. She became a captain. She was born in Jamaica. She now goes around schools talking to young Black girls to encourage them to become pilots as well. She tries to encourage them to think and believe in themselves. And she makes me very proud because I'm her auntie. That's my sister's daughter. Next slide, please. We all hear of Marcus Garvey. Never hear really much about the women. And they did so much. He obviously liked the name Amy. Amy Ashford Garvey was his first wife. And Amy Jacques was actually her chief bridesmaid. But we won't talk about that scandal right now. We're just going to talk about the good things they did. He eventually, obviously, Amy Ashford and him, they fought a lot. But she still fought for the rights of Black people up and down the country, going to Africa. It never stopped her, even though they got divorced. She obviously never talked to Marcus ever again. And then Amy, she took the gauntlet and also helped him to the point that people would prefer to hear her talk than Marcus, which sometimes made him annoyed. You'd think he'd have been encouraged. But I would like to see more about what they did. So I'm going to be pushing that more, you know, for the girls. But I'm going to be pushing that more because there are a lot of women. We talk about Martin Luther King. We never talk about his wife, who also was by his side and fighting for the rights. And we need to get that out there. So come on, everybody, not just the women. Look for these amazing people in history. So we're not just talking about one gender. We're talking about both. Okay, next slide, please.
One of the waitresses, 32-year-old Brandy Hammond.
Oh, that sounds good.
Right. On this, who do you recognise the most as being mostly talked about?
Rosa Parks.
Rosa Parks, yeah.
Claudette came first.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Stop ruining me fun, Michaela.
Sorry. I just had an argument with someone with this earlier on, a couple of weeks ago. They were telling me who's Claudette, and I said Claudette.
Claudette, because of, I don't blame them because I do understand why they did this. Claudette got basically, she was 15 years old, she was pregnant for a married man, and they knew that the press would just go on about the fact that she was 15 and pregnant for a married man, and they wouldn't look at the fact of why she wouldn't give up her seat. And we know this. But once it happened and the boycott happened, I think they should have talked about her. Not just Rosa Parks. You're almost doing what the white people have done to our history. And Claudette needs to be held as well. But why have I got Ida B. Wells on here? She was a journalist. She was an activist. When she saw that people were being lynched, her friend ran a successful business and he was lynched because he ran a successful business. As we know, we heard of Rosewood, another place, the Wall Street, that were burnt down because of jealousy, because of discrimination, because of racism. And she was from New York, but she would go down to the South and campaign to try and stop people from lynching people. That almost became her life focus. And her house in Chicago is now a museum as well. But the reason why she's on this page with Claudette and Rosa is because she too was thrown off some public transport. She made quite a bit of money because she worked for different newspapers up and down the country. And so she bought a first class ticket. She could afford it. She went and sat in there. So some people didn't quite like the fact there was a black lady sitting in first class. And they were looking around at her. So the guard then came up to her and said to her, she had to go back into the cart that was there for the coloureds. And she said, no, I paid for my first class ticket. I'm not moving anywhere. 11 men pulled her off that train and just threw her out with her case. She couldn't take the train. She was banned from the train. She successfully sued them for what they did. And then they won an appeal. It's never stopped her. It never stopped her in all her life campaigning. She was supposed to get married so many times to this poor man. They eventually did. They had to squeeze it in because she never stopped campaigning until the day she died. And that is why she's on here. So we do hear about Rosa Parks, but we should also hail Claudette. We should also hail Ida as being our heroines of the time. Next slide, please. Now, these two ladies of music. Is anybody old enough to remember the Will Tappers and Shunters Club?
No, I'm not. Too young.
Sonia, I know. Sonia, if you didn't put your hand up, I swear I'd have cost you anyway. Yes. The Will Tappers and Shunters Club was a working man's kind of club that was featured on TV. And I think it was based in Sheffield, I'm not sure. And there was this music that was played, and it was her that wrote the music for that. No one ever knew that the person behind the piano, because they'd always have this white guy with a flat cap on the piano, but the person actually playing the music was Winifred Atwell. She sold 1 million records, the first person, the pioneer of pop stars in Britain to sell 1 million copies. And I actually have 2 of her 78s. Not being funny, the music's horrible, but it was there for that time. She came from Trinidad, eventually ended up in Australia, but she has never been given the acclaim she should have.
Do you get them signed by her?
Dorian, I swear, I'm going to see you soon, Yeah, I did get them signed, and they said to lick Don Dorian when I see him next time. So anyway, sorry folks for me talking into that way, sorry. Anyway, we now have Alison Buchanan. She was born in Bedford, lived in Queen's Park, and was Britain's youngest diva at the time across the world. Did you hear about it? Did you know about it? No. She won a prize. The teacher told her she would not be able to do it because she was black, and they won't have somebody black doing it. She funded it herself. She won. And all of a sudden the school said, "Oh, Alison, yes, we knew you would win." She's been in Porgy and Bess. She's been in, she's sung at Blind Ball, you name it. Her voice is amazing. She actually came down and did a youth club for me, where I put on the poster, "Who wants to sing like Mariah Carey?" And then Alison came in and she sang a bit of opera. So they were like, "I don't want to sing this screechy music." And she said, "Hold on." And she hit a high C, and they stopped in their tracks and they went, "How'd you do that?" She captivated them all. They stayed for the whole thing. They loved it. And again, I have to put my little family connection here. Her grandmother's my godmother, but she's an amazing person. She now runs Pegasus, and they are looking to try and introduce young black children into the art of opera. Next slide, please. I've got Diane Abbott here, Yvonne Connolly, and Barbara Blake Hannah. Now, you know what I was saying about the firsts. When I mean first, it's not because I said like we found our brain and suddenly chucked it in our heads. We've always had it. We just had to break down some barriers with our shoulders. And these women broke down barriers with their shoulders. Diane Abbott gets so much bad press, it upsets me. She has fought and done so many things for the community. I urge you to look it up. I urge you to see what she does, and I urge you to sing her praises. Don't listen to what they say about her. She has had to put up with so much ridicule. We need to get behind this woman. We need to sing her praises to everyone. She has done so much for education of black young people and made so much leeway, and she needs our support. It doesn't matter if you don't vote Labour. It's about this black woman here that needs that support. Yvonne Connolly was the first black head at Ringcross School in London. I don't know where in London. And in 1969, when racism was still legal, and I say that because it was made illegal in the 70s. So if it was made illegal, that means it was legal, because we still had the colour bar. And they thought that she was going to cure all racism. And she did what she could. She was an amazing head teacher. She was an amazing teacher. She only went for the job because she wanted to see what kind of thing she'd need if she wanted to become a head, and got the job. And the rest is history. And then we have Barbara Blake Hannah. She was the first TV presenter with Eamon Holmes. And again, I'm sorry, Sonia, I'm going to do this because I know me and you are the same age. Okay. Anybody remember This Is Your Life with the big red book? Eamon Holmes. She worked with him. Now, she was a wonderful addition. She'd come over here to act in a part in the High Winds of Jamaica. So she'd come to act in that, then went into a bit of modelling. She always, her trade was, or her profession was, a journalist. She'd written for the Cosmopolitan, the West Indian World, etc., before landing this part. And again, she just went for the interview just to see what it was like and got the job. Sad thing about it, 9 months later, she was just told she didn't have a job because like what was happening with the Tesco's adverts, Sainsbury's adverts, in those days, the racist voice counted, and she was just told that she couldn't do it anymore because no one wanted to see the N on their TV.
Mhm.
And that's the sad thing about it. Even with Yvonne Connolly, she used to get pictures sent to her with her face scratched out. Sometimes people would put a monkey face on it, and then also tell them we're going to burn down the school with her in it. And you know, obviously, people know what Diane Abbott's had to put up with. So we've got to praise these people. Next slide, please. So my question to you, and then Una's going to take over and pose another question. How do we go about dismantling the barriers that hold back so many Black pupils and students? What are we going to do? This is something that's recurring all the time. What are we going to do? Is it too expensive to make the changes? And what are the consequences? And one thing I've always said to everybody, we are our children's first teachers. We are. We don't send them to school in nappies. We don't send them to school suckling a bottle, okay? And we don't send them to school still going goo goo gaga. So we taught them. So where does it start? What do we need to do? And how are we going to do it? Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Pauline. That was lovely. That was really well presented. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Learned a lot as well.
Sorry about the patois.
No worries. It's authentic. It's our culture. It's our heritage. It comes all. But yeah, it was really good. Really enjoyed it. So.
Sorry, Una, and can you just stop sharing your screen when you can? Sorry, not now, but yeah, and I'll mute everybody and ask them to come in. If you can mute yourselves, I can't see everybody, but that's thank you. Keep going, Una. Thank you.